Hello and welcome. My name is Emily Blevins, class of 2011. I'm the design director and one of 5 co-founders of Marin Living Magazine and a proud alumna of University High School. Thank you for joining us for this virtual event celebrating the Decorator Showcase, now in its 43rd year. Today's talk is not intended to be a substitute for buying a ticket to the virtual tour of Showcase. Rather, we hope to enhance your experience of the virtual tour, whether you have seen it or have yet to buy your ticket. We're going to introduce each alum at the beginning of their respective segments. I would like to begin by telling you a little bit about Marin Living Magazine and what I do there. Marin Living is a new lifestyle publication in the Bay Area, founded on the basis of bold optimism and a love for our community. We have a vested interest in Marin's new population and look to bring the next generation of Marinites into the conversation, those who are migrating from densely populated Bay Area neighborhoods, while continuing to engage those who have built their life here. We are committed to producing fresh content that celebrates positivity, change, local businesses, and the beauty of our surroundings. I am passionate about bringing a fresh perspective to the magazine and brand from the ground up. Inspired by the landscape of Marin, I have created a visual aesthetic that is approachable, confident, and modern. To learn more about us, view our social media at Marin Living Magazine and our website, marinlivingmagazine.com. Before I introduce you to the alumni design professionals participating today, I'd like to introduce you to Thelma Garza, the director of this annual fundraiser, now in its 43rd year.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you all for being here tonight. I really appreciate your support. As you know, and as it says right in front of you, Decorator Showcase was created to benefit the financial aid program of University High School. And we are surprised sometimes to find out how little people know that. It was founded by Nan Rosenblatt, who is a parent and a member of the Design Advisory Board, continues to be a member of the Design Advisory Board. And as Emily said, our 43rd year. And it has been a hell of a challenging year this year with COVID-19 and the fires too. We had to postpone mid-March and keep our fingers crossed. The house was almost ready for our spring opening in April, but we had to completely shut down. When those restrictions were raised for us to be able to go in there and finish, the house was finally finished at the end of July, at which time we decided, given the current conditions and the health department, we decided not to open for live in-person tours. So the filming began for the virtual showcase, and for those of you who have seen it, I really hope you've enjoyed it. And those of you who have not, please purchase and enjoy the tour. It was filmed actually by an alum of UHS, Dan Hurst, class of 1985. And he did a fantastic job with him and his subcontractors. And so we are very happy to have had the designers, through their determination and commitment, actually get this show off the ground, and also all of the support we've had from our parent community, our sponsors, our corporate sponsors, and our patrons. So I'm pleased that, very pleased with the product, and I hope you will be too. Thank you.
Thanks, Thelma.
Thelma, do you want to say something about the Cherish?
Yes, Cherish came on to support us. There are a few of the designers who are selling items that are featured in this year's showcase. We are, meaning UHS, will receive part of the proceeds of the sales of these items. So the sale started on September 17th and will go through November 17th. So if you're interested in some really hot items, please take a look and choose to buy something so that we can get even more funds for the financial aid program.
Wonderful, thank you. Today we will hear from 5 alumni design professionals, 3 of whom are joining us from outside the US. We asked this group to watch the Decorator Showcase virtual tour and pick a room or design element that they especially appreciated and share it with you. I'll introduce each alum at the beginning of their segment and share images of their own work before we hear his or her remarks. We recommend speaker view in Zoom combined with side-by-side so you can see both the slideshow and the speaker at the same time. You can select this configuration in view options for this presentation. After graduating from UCLA, Marjorie Skouras, class of 1978, spent 20 years in the film business, which included her position as Executive Vice President of Acquisitions at Skouras Pictures and programming the Sundance Film Festival. In 2000, Marjorie entered the world of interior and product design. Over the past 2 decades, she has been hailed as one of the 100 most influential designers in the US, and her work has been published in books and magazines around the world. She now resides in an historic house in Merida, Mexico, where her work includes product design and production, a gallery of Mexican photography, as well as the sale of her curated collection of Mexican designer dresses from the 1970s and home decor at her boutique La Malaquita. Part of her heart remains in San Francisco.
Marjorie, just tell me what slide you want me to go to.
Hi guys, hi everybody. Hi UHS, woohoo! Hi Mark, you're right above me, I see you. How fun this is. Let's go to the Decorator Showcase rooms, please. And I chose them because I was drawn immediately to the mescal plants because I sit this evening, and you can't see it unfortunately, I am broadcasting live from the Yucatan coast of Mexico. We're on the Gulf Coast for a long weekend. It's really beautiful. It's gotten dark unfortunately, but the beach is literally 30 feet behind me, the water. Anyway, I thought Tineka's rooms, Tinika Triggs is the designer, were super cool, and having done showcase houses, you know, it's super challenging. You think that you just like, you know, you pick a room, you go in there, you put your stuff in, and that's it. It takes a really long time to pull it all together. It's like months. And what she did in this space is really neat, and it's a small space, so that she has another room that's big, but this was a challenge to work in a space that's confined. And in my foyer, which I'll talk about in a sec, we did something really similar with the tone-on-tone, gray on gray, black on gray painting. This is hand painted, these walls that you guys are looking at. So that's a really big commitment and a wonderful thing to have done for a showcase house. The artist is Caroline Lizarraga. So if anybody's looking for somebody to come and paint the walls of their house, this woman seems extremely talented. She also painted the top of the bar table that has the 2 stools in front of it with that really great looking snake, of which there are some around me. There are coral snakes here, which are very venomous. And I also love the color combination. It's right up my alley with the beautiful coral, curvy, really sexy built-in banquettes that you guys are looking at. And the, hang on a second, I'm gonna tell you that the Macklin table by Stephen Antonson is that pedestal table in cast plaster, which is really great. Love plaster. We're working on a new collection right now for a Currying company for whom I design with plaster covered light fixtures. It also is reminiscent for those of you who are old enough, and I think unfortunately qualify for that now to be old enough, John Dickinson, who was a really big decorator in San Francisco in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and he did all this really fabulous stuff, which now goes for a fortune at auctions, covered in white plaster. Super, super, super classic, super great looking. There's one of these neat video art pieces on the wall. I am not that sophisticated, but it looks really cool. I loved her choices of lighting, which is obviously right up my alley. The bar stools are beautiful, covered in that tan color leather. It's a super inviting bar. She says that all of the bar accoutrements are vintage. So yeah, she's done a beautiful job putting it all together. The cabinet is absolutely fabulous. All the design information is there on the website for you if you'd like to go and see where she got all the stuff. But I think that overall, what she's done is really sophisticated, really elegant, and you know, it's in your house, or theoretically it's in your house. It's a great house. And you know, I would be inclined to actually go there and like have a drink, right? And the kids, for sure, I think would go there and have a drink, right? Our class would have gone there and had a drink. Anyway, it's really beautiful. If you want to flip over to my first couple of slides, I'll show you from our house in Mexico why I was drawn immediately to this room. Not that one. There's one that was the foyer. It's the, nope.
Nope.
Keep going.
Is that it?
Nope. Keep going. There. Okay. So this is our house in Mexico where I am not at. Oop. There was our house in Mexico. Really briefly, I hope that you saw it. There it is. So we had the walls painted much the same as these walls, and it's an unusual treatment. A lot of people paint murals in, you know, in really vibrant, great colors. It's called grisaille in French. A lot of the old French papers from the 19th century, paper houses that are still in production actually, use this technique, and ours, we let the painter, who's incredible, who spent 4 months just restoring the stencils in our house, we let him do what he felt, and he was, the only restriction was, you know, to stay on the tone on tone, and to use local flora and fauna, which he did brilliantly. There's another close-up slide if you want to flip to it quickly, and it just shows the connection for me right there to this bar, this really beautiful bar that she's done, and how much I love the color play against this really subtle tone-on-tone backdrop, and it really emphasizes the pieces that you use in the space. I also like her work because of her use of color. In her other room, she used a tremendous amount of color, which is very attractive to me. If you guys want to flip to the pink modern living room, there you go. This is a living room that I did in 2007, actually, and this house was on the cover of Metropolitan Home Magazine, which was super fun, and then a bunch of other magazines around the world. And I'm drawn, as you can see, the corals and pinks and all that. If you can switch to me, for me to the other slide, the pink slide, which is our current living room in Mexico. There you go. So pink follows me, coral follows me. I really love it. And what else can I tell you about this? I can tell you, because she's on here, that if it weren't for Prudy Kohler at UHS, I may not have tripped down this interesting path in my life, because I certainly didn't start there. I went into the film business, and there were the artist in me, which was born in Prudy's studio at UHS in 1977, was waiting to come out. She was waiting to come to Mexico too, but she was certainly waiting to come out. And we spent innumerable hours, all of our free time in the art room and the dark room. And
Marjorie, thank you.
Hey, Prudy!
Thank you. It was so much fun.
It was so much fun. And I tried to find some pictures and I couldn't. And you'll be really happy to know that we've started the only gallery of photography in Merida, which is interesting because Merida is a really cultural city, and the art scene is really booming, or was really booming before this blip in the radar. But we are specializing in Mexican and Latin American photography with a partner in Mexico City who's very famous.
Excellent. That is so great. I'm so proud of you. Yay.
Oh, thank you.
Yay.
You know, I wish my daughter I wish my daughter could be on this. She's up at McGill. She's a senior at McGill. Because I brought her, just a sideline before I passed the baton, but we were walking around San Francisco one afternoon because, you know, the other half of my heart will forever be in San Francisco. I'm a fourth generation one. And I was walking her around. It was a beautiful afternoon, and, you know, she loves it too. And I said, oh my God, there's my school, there's my high school. I said, do you want to go and see? And she said, okay. And so we went to the front desk and we explained who we were. And I said, you know, can we just walk around? I said, sure. So we go downstairs and there's this bulletin board there, and it said UHS graduates who've made a living in the arts, right? And there was my picture. So I didn't know this. I didn't know it was there. And so you can imagine for my then like 18-year-old daughter, 17-year-old daughter, that was sort of a trip and a half. But it also just goes to show the right foundation, and there are a lot of other skills that are involved in this whole business, that you.
Oh, Marjorie, you just cut out. So I think I'm so sorry, Marjorie. I think we're going to go on to the next speaker. That was lovely to hear your reminiscing. Emily, go for it.
So next up, we have LaToya Burton, class of 1998. She guides clients in creating supportive homes to reflect their unique way of being and nourish a sense of inner belonging. Her process unites design, art, and creative self-discovery as a catalyst for growth and creative living. Her portfolio highlights the belief that we all deserve access to quality design, bridging knowledge of designing public community spaces for the city and county of San Francisco to a more intimate level in her current projects. LaToya holds a bachelor's in design and a master's of architecture. She lives in Australia with her husband and son, traveling in their tiny home on wheels.
Thank you, Emily. First, I'd just like to acknowledge the Malariji people, the Gimoy, Wallabura, Yadinji, Yuraganji people, the traditional owners here in Australia, on whose land, which I currently live and move between. I recognize their continuing connection to the land, to the water, and community. I pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. I'd like to also acknowledge the Gilamu, the traditional lands of the Chokino and the Ramatush Ohlone people from my hometown of San Francisco, where most of you are viewing us from. It's so good to see you all. And I pay my respect to those elders, past, present, and emerging as well. You can go to the first slide. Welcome to the dining room, or salle d'étude, designed by Kelly Hola Interiors. The name in French means study hall. So although this is traditionally would be the dining room, this space has been used as a multifunctional space. And it's one of the first spaces that you visit in the tour. And it stood out to me because it was one of the rooms in the house that was designed for the entire family to gather in. It's like a hub of the home, and I really appreciated that. I also love the functionality, as the design is based on the desire to have the room have multiple purposes. So instead of formal dining that might only be used occasionally, this space is meant to be used daily and not only for eating dinner. One of the main features of this room is a sculptural Ashwood central table made by a San Francisco craftsman, Thomas Featherston. And it's been broken into two separate tables so that there's the possibility of rearranging and changing the scale of how one would sit in this space, view each other, and interact. Rather than being your typical rectangle, this table has many angles on it. So there's different views that family members would have of each other and of the space itself. I can just imagine like a child coming home from school and hopping into these seats, the bench seats that have been custom made, and having a snack or doing their homework or doing a puzzle. I can also imagine that you would set the mood in this space with music, and everyone can gather around the table for a big family shared meal, or each family member can do their own separate activity, but all in the same space. That idea of how design can relate to social interaction has always been really important in my practice, so I really appreciate that. And I would say this room has beautiful bones, if you will, and it can be dressed however you desire. So although Kelly has chosen vibrant palette of blues, teals, magentas, purples, along with a more neutral gray on the rug, the walls, and the window treatments, which frame the beautiful view outside, yeah, I think you can use these ideas and apply it to your own home with whatever color palette suits you. And also, where we quite often see a built-in bench seat and a traditional classic San Francisco bay window, instead the designer has chosen to place a sofa here, where you can imagine snuggling up with your partner or reading a book to your child at any time of day. So the room not only functions as an extension of the adjacent kitchen, which is also a quite stunning space, the built-ins allow the space to be a library or a study as well. And it can be rearranged for different events, and you could welcome close friends over for an intimate birthday gathering or a game night. Yeah, I really love the concept that this can be applied to any home, especially smaller spaces that inherently need to house a family's many activities. So yeah, I think that that kind of concept, and when you see other rooms in the showcase, you can be inspired and apply this to your own home. Kelly's left no surface unturned in this space. For each carefully thought out detail, she's consciously chosen each piece, and she's represented craft from local artisans from San Francisco and the Bay Area, and created these bespoke pieces for the space, including a hand-painted ceiling, reminding us not to forget that that surface isn't off limits when you decorate your own home. So don't be afraid to get up there and put your own special touch on the ceiling. And yeah, and remember to collaborate with your local artists and maker friends when you're decorating your space. And yeah, I just wanted to share too that one of my favorite parts about Decorator Showcase has been that it's this opportunity for designers to take their imagination and make it a reality. And that must have sunk in subconsciously, because I really enjoyed volunteering at Showcase as a student, so much so that I eventually went in to study interior design in Syracuse and came back to San Francisco and did architecture at Academy of Arts, where Nan actually had a big role in the interior design department there as well. So that's just another connection to Showcase. And I actually came back and was a docent for many years. So I'm really honored to be here to share this year's Showcase, since I'm all the way in Australia. Let's see, this room, oh, I absolutely love this room. When I walked in, I felt completely at home. So this is Wabi Sabi Wunderkind by Sean Leffers. And this is one of the 2 children's rooms in the tour. And like I said, immediately felt at home. I can completely see myself sitting in those woven Wagner chairs, journaling, listening to music, or reading a book on the rug with my son. You know, I could get comfortable in this space. And it's one of the main elements here is that tree throughout the that you can view through the window. It's a magical pine tree that just graces the room. And again, in this image, you can see how Sean, you pulled that chartreuse color, which is pretty bold, but he went into the details of the moss and on the tree and brought that into the space. And it really works here because it's balanced with the neutral whites, creams, tans, and wood tones. And it's all accented with this beautiful round moon pendant lamp by David Gropey, and it's placed on a ceiling that has the subtlest tint of green added to it. So again, don't forget your ceilings as a space that you can do something to as well. And as the name implies, this room references the Japanese concept of wabi-sabi, finding the beauty and value in the perfectly imperfect mixed with a minimalist feel. And one of the ways this is achieved is by bringing plants in from the outside and using natural materials like wood and stone in the details. And the designer was really conscious of making this a gender neutral space. And I feel age neutral as well, because like I've been discussing, like I could be in this space, anybody could be in this space, even though it's meant for a child. So it sort of gives you a different perspective of what you can provide a child as they're growing up, what is in their visual environment that will be like this in the background, that they can be in these beautiful spaces that don't necessarily have what you would traditionally consider a children's room. The other thing I really appreciated about this space was again, the color palette, and that Sean chose items that are drawn from a range of time periods with sculptures and relics dating back to the 1800s and beyond. And he matched it with this classic mid-century modern chairs that have been updated with beautiful fabrics by the likes of Holly Hunt, Maharam, and Schumacher. So texture is a major part of this design as well, whether it's in the linen wallpaper that has flecks of mica or the fun amorphous organic shaped wool rug on the floor, and the subtle yet impactful line drawings by Agnes Martin and the other artwork by Ambrosine Allen. Both of which actually remind me of my days in design school when we practiced drawing sheets and sheets of freehand lines and shapes to prepare us for drawing and drafting. So overall, this room has been skillfully designed. It has 3 zones that flow beautifully together. The seating in front of you, the desk, which is off to the right, that when you see the tour, you'll be able to enjoy that as well, and the beds to the left. Yeah, just a really sophisticated, eclectic, fun mood about this space that I can completely relate to. The bunk beds have custom bedding and fabric panels with subtle leaf patterns reminiscent of traditional Japanese soji screens made of natural materials that pair with more modern clean lines of the light fixtures like the AJ sconces that are perfect for reading in bed. Yeah, so just again, although it's a children's room, can't you like totally see yourself sneaking away here? I like to have a hideaway to relax or create in. Yeah, and thank you so much for joining us today. I really love that these spaces bring like a sense of peace and comfort and belonging. And I encourage you to take a look at the rest of the showcase to help with the financial aid program so that another student like myself can attend university like I did many years back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, LaToya. Up next, Spencer Small, class of 2017, is a senior at Brown University studying architecture and computer science. His studies in architecture are through the Rhode Island School of Design as part of a joint degree program between the 2 institutions. Over the past 2 summers, Spencer has worked as a studio intern at Piota Architecture in San Francisco, where he designed custom furnishings using computational design techniques. After Brown, Spencer hopes to further explore the intersection of his 2 interests, which were fostered at UHS through courses like Western Civ and AP Computer Science.
Thank you for that introduction, Emily, and thank you all for coming. What struck me in the showcase, especially were the powder rooms or the half baths, and I think that was because I'm always fascinated by how designers respond to design constraints, and I think of design thinking as problem solving. So I found that each designer had their own solution to this problem and successfully, enlarged their small spaces. So I'd like to, with you, go through every example. And what we're looking at now is Chad Dorsey's listening room bathroom. In his interview, he said that he was worried about using such a small space, but he really successfully allowed the room to live much larger. And I think he did this through using elongated elements. So we can see this long mirror and the stacked sconces, the fluted vanity, and the shower mirror as well. Give the space a verticality that allows it to transcend the human scale, and really make the space live large. Next slide. This is Jeffrey Neve's Green with Envy, and he took a different approach to this design constraint, which is through this kind of illusion or a thematic decoration, in using these repeated textures from the wall to ceiling. You can see with the marble floor, the countertop, even the ottoman beneath the vanity. There's this coherent theme throughout the room that kind of transports you out of the showcase into a Narnia, so to speak. He uses this phrase, delivering the drama, as his as a theme of this room, and I love that because it is so dramatic, and totally takes you out of it. So it's another way you can distract from a size constraint. And I will note that both Jeffrey and Chad in the previous example used floating vanities to allow the space to breathe a little more. So if you're designing a bathroom for yourself, for someone else, and you have a small space to work with, floating elements tend to enlarge the room. Next slide, please. Barbara Bright here in her Azure guest bathroom used a similar technique to Jeffrey in repeating patterns to enliven the space, but also to distract from its size. She also plays with depth. So this photo is taken from the entrance of the bathroom, and you're immediately looking at the back shower wall, which has this beautiful mosaic tile that matches the floor. And even though I haven't been in the space, I can imagine that this visual is a 2D experience almost, because the floor does match the wall, and then walking into the space creates this spatial expansion, kind of like what I'd imagine a dolly zoom to be like. And this beautiful azure dimensional tile to the right kind of comes alive, almost like the ocean. So another way of distracting the visitor, this time through a kind of surprise of more space than expected, even though it's still a powder room. Last slide. And this is Studio Ku's raw simplicity. So unlike the last three examples, I found Studio Ku to really embrace the size of the room and treat it with a minimalism that says, yeah, I'm small, but I have one really interesting element, which is this sculpture in the corner here, which is not a Ruth Asawa, which surprised me, but is definitely reminiscent of her work. And through using this minimalism, right, so the plaster finish on the left wall and the natural stone wall tiles on the right, it really lets the sculpture speak. And it being right inside the door here also serves as a kind of a magnetic circulatory element, right? So it attracts people from the hallway and also brings people out of the bathroom again. So it's this centerpiece that allows the room to be minimalist, but not boring. So Studio Ku actually used the phrase "refined with a twist," which I love, because I think that's exactly this. And the sculpture itself is twisted, so a little pun there as well. But yeah, overall, I think the four designers really addressed the spatial issue in unique and successful ways, and kind of transporting the visitor through the experience of the space in really novel ways.
These are great examples. Thank you, Spencer. Up next, we have Rochelle Best, class of 2009. Rochelle is a left-handed redhead with synesthesia. She is currently operations manager and design assistant for Kathy Best Design, which specializes in crisp, clean interior design for high-end residential projects. Rochelle has years of experience in various industries, including business consulting, events, and publishing. She has a passion for the arts and is a freelance dance reviewer and member of the Seattle Women's Chorus. She spends her spare time reading, eating ice cream, and learning how to handstand.
Thank you, Emily. It's great to be here and great to see everybody on the presentation here. I love seeing former teachers and friends' names. I would like to talk about the soak and spin laundry room today. When I was similar to Spencer, really inspired by how the Nest Design Company, which is Jennifer Wondrow and Heather Brock, used this small utilitarian space and made it really beautiful. Their intention was to create movement through texture, also inspired by the tree outside the window, similar to LaToya's room that she talked about. And they did that through the textures. And as you can see a little bit, and another reason to get a ticket to the tour, so you can really zoom in and see these beautiful details. There's textured wallpaper on the wall. There's movement in the marble used for the backsplash that continues into the countertops. There's these large dark tiles on the floor and the bark-like texture on the lower cabinets that enclose the washing machine and dryer. And all these themes of movement tie into the laundry, splashing around in the machine and then being folded by hand afterward. I just think there's some elegance here with the difference of the textures and the contrast, and it shows how a small space can really, you can put a lot into it and it's not overwhelming. I think that effect is also achieved by the light neutral color palette. It's sort of a spa-like atmosphere with these tans and neutrals and whites, which are grounded by the charcoal colors in the floor and the knobs and pulls on the cabinets. And then there's this lovely, huge photograph on the opposite wall. This is George Silk's photograph, Perfect Entry, of this diver, which also ties into the water and the splashing element of a laundry room. And then the other art pieces in the room are more abstract contemporary art, but they also have a charcoal tone to them. And I like the contrast between this figure in the big photograph and then the more abstract, smaller pieces and the organic shapes of the accessories, which you can see in the previous slide. Thank you. The blue window treatment is also a really nice, clean accent. And the black sink, which you can't really see in these photos, but is to the right in this image, is unexpected. You might expect a clean white sink in a laundry room, but I really like the unexpected detail of the black sink that ties in with the pulls on the drawers. These cabinets are also custom built around the laundry appliances, and I enjoy that they thought about those details and have everything in its place. There's even that pull-out cabinet with detergent that you can see in this picture. And that way, when you're not actively doing the laundry chores, everything can be closed up and it's a really clean space to look at when you're walking by the room. And overall, it's a place where the eye has space to rest, but also enjoy art in a space that might otherwise be more utilitarian. And it's a good example of a way to add creativity and beauty to a room that you might not think could have that. And let's see, let's move to the next slide. This space is another example of using a sometimes overlooked space to do something special. This is the Botanicai Stairwell and Landing by Design Gallery. And they used some of a similar dark color on the walls here and the neutral colors on the floor. So the color palette's similar to the laundry room, but flipped. And of course, the wall color here is much more dramatic, but that dark backdrop to the botanical prints really shows off the artwork and makes the colors pop. And again, there's this contrast between the organic forms of the realistic botanical art with this white sculpture that you can see on the black marble pedestal in the foreground, which is by Yoko Kubrick, who's a San Francisco sculptor, which is more gestural and figurative than the realism of the artwork behind it. So again, staircases can be a pass-through space and can sometimes be overlooked, but there's real opportunity there in a house to make it special and to make even moving from one room to another feel exciting. Here's another view of the landing above this staircase. So at Kathy Best Design, we are also very excited about doing powder rooms like the bathrooms that Spencer talked about, and laundry rooms. We have a particular fondness for that. And just taking those small spaces and making them really pop. Because of the scale, it's a great way to play and take some design risks that you might not otherwise be confident doing in a larger room like a dining room or a kitchen. And it still works because it's on a bit of a smaller scale. Especially now that we're spending so much more time at home, it can be really nice to take a moment in these smaller, sometimes overlooked spaces and really appreciate what's there. So thanks very much. I'll turn it back to Emily.
Thank you, Rochelle. Yuma Shinohara, class of 2010, is a curator and editor working in the fields of architecture and urbanism. Following positions at Storefront for Art and Architecture in New York, Ruby Press in Berlin, the Académie der Künste Berlin, and the Canadian Centre for Architecture in Montreal, he is currently assistant curator at the SAM Swiss Architecture Museum in Basel, Switzerland. He has translated Bruno Taut into English, among others, and has worked for magazines such as Arch Plus and A+U. He graduated with a degree in Comparative Literature and Society from Columbia University in New York.
Thank you, Emily, for the introduction. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes, we can hear
you. Great. Okay. Yeah, no, thank you again, Emily, for the introduction. And also thank you to the UHS Alumni Association for this invitation to give my 2 cents about the Decorator Showcase from across the globe. I'd like to talk about 2 rooms in particular. The first room is actually one you've already seen before. It's the dining room / study by Kelly Hola Interiors that LaToya already talked about. And like LaToya, I'm particularly attracted to the room because of the multifunctionality, and I think LaToya has already wonderfully described kind of what elements of the room make it or kind of allow it to kind of absorb these different functions. I particularly wanted to highlight in this room something that's very interesting for me, particularly the idea of, let's say, combining in particular the study with the dining room. So in a sense, the combination of a space of work with that of what you might call leisure. It's a combination that's striking for me because in many ways the idea of work is actually anathema to the traditional dining room, right? So the very idea of separating the kitchen from the dining room is actually about hiding the work that goes into preparing the food and to perform a certain effortlessness when the food comes to the table. So reinserting work back into the dining room is, I would argue, it does have a certain subversive quality to it that I find very interesting. And I think it's also a move that has a particular relevance today in this COVID moment, where with the proliferation of home office, you have a variety of different spaces in the home being readapted for the purposes of work, right? So in this context, I find this design quite inspiring because it shows a strategy for how to use the tools of interior design and furniture to retrofit dining room, a traditional dining room, and to make it adaptable and kind of make it able to absorb different functions. You know, one thing, and we talk about this in the museum also as well, that I work at, and one thing that COVID has exposed, in particular in architecture, is the necessity to design our living spaces and in a way that these spaces will also accommodate a number of different potential uses, right? And while not everyone has the means to have a dining room like this, as LaToya said, I do think the strategies that were deployed here do have a certain relevance for how all of us should be thinking about the spaces in which we live. Another space that's taken on particular significance in COVID times is external space or outdoor space, right? Public space, streets, parks, but of course also the garden. Probably guess where I'm getting at. I want to talk about the rear garden in particular. This is a design that was done by Terremoto. That's a landscape architecture firm that's based in Los Angeles and San Francisco. This garden in particular was done by Alain Paroy and Nadia Argadoumi from the San Francisco office. And what interests me here with this design is how the designers are playing with on multiple levels, I think, with the idea of time. So on the material level, for example, we could take a closer look at the terrace walls to give you a little bit of quick context for those who haven't taken the tour yet. The garden's on the eastern side of the house, it's a rather shady side, also surrounded by other plots, and it has a slight incline. So originally this incline was managed by dividing this garden into two differentiated zones. So a lower zone that's accessed via a staircase coming from the main back door, and then there's a second slightly elevated zone that's held in place with a retaining wall. In designing the renovation of this garden, Terremoto decided to extend this idea of the terrace with their design. And I think you can see this if you go back to the ground plan of the garden. They extended the idea of the terrace and then actually added a third terrace level as well. What's very interesting in this intervention, though, is that, well, first of all, even in adding kind of this additional terrace, they decided to retain some of the original terrace walls, right? And then they did another intervention in that they painted the walls that they added to the garden white, while leaving the original retaining walls as found, essentially. So you can see this particularly in the next slide, where you see it in the bottom half of the photo. You see actually the original retaining wall, which has this kind of weathered look. Kind of a little bit vaguely, but also on the right hand side of the photo as well, kind of this white new additional retaining wall. So there's a very stark contrast. It's a contrast that is perhaps a bit jarring at first, but it's also something that has the effect of drawing attention to these walls, which otherwise could easily have blended into the rest of the garden. And I think it's in particular kind of serves to highlight the qualities, let's say the kind of weathered qualities of these historic terrace retaining walls, which I find quite a lovely way to kind of nod to what existed before this intervention and a way to kind of narrate the history of the site through what is at the end of the day a rather simple intervention, just a paint, right? So time also plays a role in this space in the sense that, in contrast perhaps to other rooms in the showcase, we're dealing here primarily with plants, right? With living beings that grow and change over time. And you can see this in the photographs too. The plants are still young. They've been photographed right after essentially being planted, and they won't really come into their own for another 1 to 2 years. And even then, and this, I think, the interesting thing for me, even then you can't predict 100% how the plants will look like, right? So in many ways, design intervention, or let's say the task of the designer is not just to kind of have a vision of how, everything will look like eventually, but also, also of creating the proper frameworks so that the plants will grow towards this final vision. While at the same time design certain flexibility so that the plants, if they were to change over time, would also function within the concept of the garden, right? So I have this argument here that the designers have taken these lessons in flexibility and applied this to the larger garden design and the arrangement of the spaces. And so in the same way that they're designed for plants changing over time, they're also designed for a family whose use of the garden will also change over time. Let's talk about this a little bit more. I want to direct your attention back to the ground plan. And so if we could go back to the ground plan as well on the slideshow.
Sorry.
Yeah, and in particular to the organization of the garden into 3 distinct zones. These are 3 zones that are differentiated not in terms of function, but I'd say rather in a more abstract sense in terms of the flexibility, resistance to change. To go into that a little bit more into detail, we can go through the 3 zones. We have here at the very bottom of the plan, kind of the first zone, which I would say is the most rigid, formal, and least resistant, or most resistant to change of the 3 zones. So you have a very clear axis from the staircase at the bottom right towards the fireplace in the bottom left, an axis that's accentuated by these repetitive granite slabs on the floor. And then right off of the fireplace area, you have another area, another zone with a fixed function, which is it's an outdoor kitchen. So all these elements have a quite predetermined function and are more permanent fixtures, right? So they won't be changing much even as the use of the garden changes. But then you have this the level with the dining room in the plan, right? Where this formal rigidity begins to loosen up. So it's a bit of a transitional space. You do have the dining table there, but the dining tables could also be moved around, replaced, or even downsized, you know, if let's say the kids move out, or if the family finds that this dining table is a little bit too big. And as if to encourage this more flexible approach to the space, you have the same granite slabs that you see in the first level that are reappearing, but in a fragmented manner, right? And arranged much more freely. And then finally, at the very top, you have this 3rd level where the pavement disappears entirely. We saw a photograph of this area also as well. It's basically just mulch, plants, a tree, and not much else. It's essentially an unprogrammed free space that is, let's say, entirely open to appropriation. So through this design, the designs that Terremoto has created 3 zones that users can interact with and appropriate in different ways. And you know, I'm attracted to this design because I find that the designers have been able to strike a very good balance between suggesting certain uses without foreclosing others. While the garden does have a very formal rigor and coherence to it, it also succeeds in putting the users, and particularly their lived experience and their changing relationship to the garden over time, at the center. And you know, this is important because what is design after all without its users? That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yuma.
Yuma, thank you. I'm going to take over now. Emily, thank you. If you have any questions for our panelists, please put them in the chat to everyone. And while you're thinking of questions, I'm just going to say a couple words. My name is Marianna Stark. I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement and Giving at University High School, and I'm also a proud alumna, just like this group. I want to thank our panelists, Marjorie zooming in from Mexico, LaToya from Australia, Richael from Seattle, Yuma in Germany, Spencer in San Francisco by way of Providence, and our moderator, Emily in Marin. One of the unexpected benefits of distance everything is that we're reaching so many more alumni with virtual programming. And we'll continue using this medium even after we're able to hold in-person events. We've had really positive comments from all of our alums. And I want to invite you to our next virtual event, also open to the public. It's the Runway Lecture. This will be our 4th year of the Runway Lecture. This is designed to bring the energy and dialogue on campus about social justice issues to the adult and members of our community. And this year we have a super timely panel subject, advancing public health equity during COVID-19, with 4 professionals in public health, including Dr. Jeff Hom, who is the recipient of 2020 Alumni Honors, our Distinguished Alumnus Award program. He works in Philadelphia for the Department of Public Health, and he is poised to lead the team to open the first safe injection site in the country, which was put on hold because of the pandemic. And then Jen Rogers will be our moderator. She's a television talk show host, so that'll be a really great event. I want to make sure everyone buys tickets to Showcase if they haven't already. I know I saw in the poll that many have, and I thank you for that. $25 ticket purchase includes access to the video walkthrough tour, the 3D interactive tours, and the designer interviews. And the walkthrough tour is just magical. It is just incredible, and so are the 3D tours. It's such a good value for $25. It's amazing, and I think you have 48 hours to use your pass, and you can get your tickets on sale at Decorator Showcase. So we would love to take questions if anyone has questions, or if you just want to say hi to someone who you're a fan of, because I know we have lots of friends and family who've joined. So please, if you have any questions, type them in the chat, or it's 6:03, so we'll give everyone back their Friday evening to enjoy themselves. I will ask the design professionals who spoke, do any of you have questions for each other about your work? And I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot, but I imagine that you were probably intrigued. Jennifer Hughes says she loved the rigorous perspective. Heidi Philbrick says, thank you for organizing. Nope, the team was very thorough. So Martha Callan, 78 says, thank you.
Marianna, I have a question for LaToya.
Yeah. Oh, good.
I love the van you've designed for yourself. I'm wondering if you've done any more of those.
Not so far, just ours so far, but yeah. Thank you.
I think everyone wants to know what it's like to live in a tiny home on wheels.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's very adventurous because yeah, everything is packed into a super tiny space. I'm in it now. And we've been on the road actually for about 3.5 going on 4 years. So it's very lived in, and yeah, we've gotten to see a lot of the Australian landscape moving around. Yeah, you definitely realize how little you can live with. and then little things feel like a luxury, you know. But I guess the other thing that's really beautiful about it is being so connected to the outside, because you actually don't end up spending as much time in the small space. You go out and experience what's around you a lot more. But then when you come back, you can be in your little cozy hallway. And yeah, it's been really good. If you have other questions, I could probably speak more on that.
LaToya, how often do you move from place to place?
Oh, over the past few years, it would range. My husband actually plays music. His name is Jeremiah Johnson. And so he plays what he calls contemporary Australian folk music. And so we move based on where he plays music. So it might be a few days in a place, or 1 day, or a month. So we were moving quite frequently. But more recently, we've been in one place as a base because everything here sort of went on hold. So we're looking after a property in far north Queensland of Australia. And yeah, we just come and go from there. But yeah, it always ranges.
And I have a question for Richael. Richael, to work with your mom.
That's true. I do work with my mom. Kathy Best is my mother, and I work for Kathy Best Design. She started the company before I was born and has been really on a roll since then. But I've been with the company for the last 2+ years. And it's been really interesting joining the company after being able to visit project sites while at UHS, and she actually did a showcase house, I think while I was in school there. So it was interesting to be volunteering as a docent with your mom in the same building. But I've loved getting to see the behind the scenes and do some of my own design work as part of the family business. So it's fun. There's a number of there's a few mother-daughter teams around San Francisco, and I feel happy to be part of that.
For me, I'm just going to pop in and say it is such a treat to work with my daughter because I adore her and it gives me a chance to be with her. But I love the multi-generational thing because I've got 30 years in the business experience, and she comes in with fresh ideas, and she's grown up with design, seen projects start to finish. I mean, in the dining room and always hearing about projects since she was a little one. She brings such a fresh thought in the design process, but all the new technology and everything. And it's been a real treat. And I love the projects we've done together. And I love hearing her input. And it's been wonderful for me. I'm glad she has good things to say about it too.
I
Cool.
have a question for LaToya.
Go ahead.
LaToya, what is your design space in your camper? I mean, do you work in there all the time, and how large is it, and what are the limitations?
Oh, okay. So I don't have like a specific spot that I stay in. Like right now I'm at our table, which is like dining table, work table, homeschool table. We homeschool our son, and have for the past few years. So that I sit here and design, or if we're in a spot where I can actually work with somebody in their physical space, then we arrange to pull up and drive to their space and work with them one-on-one, because I do some decluttering things like that. So I will go and be in that person's space and help them directly one-on-one. The limitations, you can't really leave anything out because once you start driving, it will fly everywhere. Even when you think something's secure, it's not. And so if I'm working on something, I usually have to pack it up or keep whatever I'm working on very small. And then we have a set of drawers that I keep some supplies in, like paints and papers and pencils. But yeah, when I do drawings, I do that mostly on the computer, so then I can be anywhere. I can stop into a library. If we're staying somewhere, I can pull out my computer. I'm often found actually sitting on the floor, typing away or drafting, things like that. So yeah, there are restrictions, but the balance, it's worth it. Yeah.
I have a question for Spencer. Spencer, the youngest person on our panel, worked in a professional office during your undergraduate experience. Tell me, like, what was that like, the dichotomy between being in the classroom and then going into the real world with different expectations?
Yeah, it was really enlightening. It's a small firm of 7 people, so I had a little more responsibility than the typical studio work, which I think was really great for my development. I'm right now not with 2 feet in the architecture space. I'm also a computer science major, so I'm focusing on web design right now. But I love my time at Kyoto, and I hope to be somewhere in interior design, architecture later in my life.
Cool. Marjorie, are you still there? We might have lost her. I think she had a bad connection from the Yucatan. Emily, oh, you're there. Okay, great. Marjorie, my question for you is, your life seems so exotic to me, and all the work you showed us in your house. I'm wondering what American qualities do you bring with you that your friends and family notice most in Mexico?
What American qualities do I bring to my work in Mexico?
Yeah.
Timeliness. Although I am being trained. I'm being trained slowly, surely, and in letting go, in surrendering. So yeah, you know, organizational, but you know, honestly, it's a wonderful place to work, and the rhythm is different, very different. And it took me about a year, honestly, to let go. Like, but all gets done. It's all really beautiful. The artisans here are spectacular, and it's at a different pace. And I'm just starting to work. I'm really excited. I'm just starting to work on the restoration of another really beautiful colonial. It's about 150 years old, with a couple from Montreal. So yeah.
Wow.
And Brooke Wentz she's still there, 78. She's supposed to be coming down to hang out with us.
How fun.
I'm here. Margie's done a terrific job actually going down there and making her own. But I must admit, when I go down there, it's very little left over of Los Angeles in Mexico. I mean, but she brings, I can't even think. That was a very good question. She brings in such a knowledge of just design in general, sort of world design, that she does every room almost very differently. But I mean, nothing is quote unquote American, essentially, but she is American. So therefore she has absorbed all these different styles and knowledge of even, you know, obviously of American designers and whatnot. So a Holly Hunt table here, or, you know, books about San Francisco there and whatnot. So there's kind of a mix of things, but she's got a great sense and knowledge of the history of almost every object that you pick up there.
And my last question is for Emily, our moderator. Emily, what is it like to start a print magazine in this day and age? Be part of the team launching a new print magazine.
It has been a whirlwind, but so amazing. So we actually started the magazine in May, in the middle of COVID, and we now have 2 issues under our belt, and we're starting the 3rd, have a website up, and it's been an insane learning experience and so fulfilling getting to know all of the businesses in Marin so far, and we're just getting started. So everybody, please check out our website, our social media, Marin Living Magazine, and we cannot wait to share more with you.
Okay, I think I'm going to read the last comment, 2 last comments that showed up in the chat from Krista Donaldson. Thank you, Yuma, for getting up so early to speak with all of us. And from Saniqua Thomas, thank you, everyone. The detailed descriptions and commentary is appreciated. Great to hear everyone talk about the field you're so passionate about. And special shout out to LaToya Burton, my bestie, also class, and to her class of 97. So cool. So Zoom is a miracle. It's really the medium we love to hate. Okay, well, thank you all so much for joining, and I hope you all can attend the Runway Lecture on October 30th, sfuhs.org/runway lecture, or alumni to learn more about what we're up to. Good evening.
Hi, thank you guys. Nice to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.